Welcome to My Hard Drive Died, episode number 4 with Scott Moulton. Hey, Scott, how you doing?
Doing great. How are you?
Pretty good. Well, I just wanted to say this show is being sponsored by the Podnutz official laptop repair video collection, which is finally released. You could check it out at podnutz.com. If you guys ever wanted to learn how to repair laptops, and it's a good idea if you have a computer repair business, instead of sending that business off somewhere else, if you know how to do it, then you can do it yourself and you can increase the profits of your business. Definitely check that out. They were just released on September 1st, so they're fresh off the press. Scott, a lot of the listeners are wondering, when you get drives into your business there, what's the biggest problem or annoyance that you run into when you try to fix them and recover the data off of them?
Well, I got to say one of the biggest problems that I see, and I guess part of the issue is that a lot of the people who listen to the podcast and stuff that send me drives are do-it-yourselfers, and so they've seen a lot of my videos, and that tends to be where most of my I don't have official marketing or anything for selling drives, so most of my client base is actually the people who have seen the videos or listened to the podcast, and I love those people. They're great. One of the things that has been a problem though is that because they've seen all these videos, and I talk about in a 50-minute presentation how to open a drive and kind of determine what's wrong with the drive and go through the process to fix your own. Some of these people want to send the drive in to me to repair, and they're double checking to see, is the platter scratched, or is there some other problem before I send it in to Scott, so maybe I can save some money or something. But what they don't realize, or what I was never able to say really in the videos, because sometimes it's in a conference or it's something that's 50 minutes and you got to kind of get a lot of information out really quick, is that Western Digital drives are one of the drives that they don't want to open. Do not open Western Digital drives. So I need to start putting out this disclaimer to try to get people to stop opening Western Digital drives. If they want to verify, Seagate drives and most of the other drives, even without a clean room and stuff, it's usually not a big problem. But Western Digital drives, once you take the screws out of the lid is actually part of the alignment, and the screws that go through the lid through a portion of the head assembly itself are used for alignment of that head assembly on the platters. So since people can't determine what their problem is, they are sometimes making it a lot worse for me when they ship it into me and it's already been opened, or they've already looked at the content on the drive. If you play with that lid, the head assembly becomes misaligned, and you can't get that alignment back without spending several hours of time. Western Digitals are terrible about that from a standpoint of trying to get them realigned after you've taken the lid off. So if you have more than one problem, let's say the problem was firmware or a board or something, once they've taken the lid off, it's almost impossible for me to tell or get it back to that state so that I can fix it from the original board and the head assembly. It just makes it very difficult for me to go through that process. So I need for people to stop opening Western Digital drives before they send them in or want to do something. If they're going to send them in for recovery anyway, they should not be opening the drive. They should only be opening a drive in an instance where they're going to try to do their own recovery. And I'm okay with that. That's why I publish the videos, and that's why I put it out there, is that if they're not going to spend somewhere between $800 and $2,000 on a drive, then they can try to do the recovery themselves.
It's good advice, but it's a little tough for them to follow that, I think, because you taught them how to do it, or the basics of what to do. They want to attempt it. That would probably be tempting. Like I just know from me personally, if I had a drive and I saw your videos, and I'd be like, well, let me give it a shot, and then I'll be like, oh, this is too hard, or this is not going to work for me, so I'll send it in to you. That's a tough situation you're in. But in Western Digitals, that's a big percentage of the drives probably that you get in, isn't it?
Yeah, it certainly is. But if they start playing with them, like for instance, the higher end drives, like the 500 gigs and things like that for Western Digitals, they have a particular firmware problem, and opening the drive, with a 500 gig drive with the number of heads that's there, it makes the alignment just almost impossible to get right again. It takes hours and hours and hours.
Wow.
So I'm just saying most of the time what you're going to have with some of those drives is going to be a firmware problem, not necessarily a head or a scratch platter.
That'd be good.
So avoid opening that lid. But you're right. But one of the things that I find that you would think, because these people do see my videos and they do want to try to do it themselves, is that maybe they should go to their pile of like some old drives they have sitting over in a corner and go play with those first and see if they can disassemble and reassemble it or something before they try the drive with the real data on it.
Good idea. That's a good idea.
They're not doing that. They're just jumping. Like I've actually get emails that go, "Hey, how do I find this donor drive so I can do a head replacement on this drive?"
Right.
And I'm like, "Well, did you try 6 other drives before you got that far? I mean, I'm sure you got a stack of old ones. You can find out how hard it is to do this head assembly, but they're really working for the first time on the very first drive."
I see.
So
that's a little risky.
Yeah, it's even in my classes, when I teach the classes, the guys who are in the classes who have had some experience with doing some of this already, who really aren't that successful at it before the class, they don't almost no one gets the first 3 or 4 drives that they do in the class while I'm mentoring them. It's not till they get to the 5th and the 6th drive that they actually start getting drives reassembled and are able to do something. And and they've got the advantage of me standing there and mentoring them and showing them how to do it in person. And it still doesn't work until you get to the 4th or 5th drive. So it's really important that if they're going to try to do their own recoveries, that maybe they should play around with older drives first.
That must be frustrating, not being able to get it to like the 4th or 5th one. I know, like in my shop, I've opened only a few drives in my life, and I did it after I resigned to the fact that I couldn't fix it, any other way, and I already told the customer, look, your drive is not recoverable by me or something. Like, you know what I mean? Like I wasn't planning on sending it out anywhere to get it recovered. I told them, like, your drive's not recoverable. And they were okay with that, and they wanted a new hard drive and just to reinstall the operating system. So it basically said, okay, well, now that they know that and that disclaimer is out to them, now I could take a look at their drive, and if I could fix it, fine. If not, it's not going to be a huge deal. And what I wanted to ask you, Scott, was on these Western Digital drives, you're talking about the front plate. Aren't the screws that hold that plate on, aren't they all around the edges? Or they actually go through the center in different parts on those drives?
They do. Sometimes you will have 2 other screws besides the ones that you can see. There's usually 6 around the edge. Sometimes there's 7 around the edge. And then
under the label?
There'll be one under the label towards the bottom of the drive where the IDE or the SATA connector is. There'll be one that actually goes to the head assembly itself. That's actually the head assembly sits on a post. Basically, it's you've all seen a picture of it where you have like the voice coil on the back and it's all wrapped in copper, and then coming out towards the end where you have the heads and it looks like an arrow or something. Mm-hmm. Basically, it's like a hole being drilled through the arrow, and you're suspending it on a post. And so the screw that comes through the top, in the lid, there's like a little dimple that comes down that touches the top of that assembly, and the screw that goes through it is tightened and torqued to just the right parameters so that head is perfectly aligned so that it can communicate with the drive without any major discomfort from that standpoint.
Are you serious? So Western Digital does that, and the other companies just do it from the inside, I gather, right?
Yeah, most of the other companies have so for instance, like most Seagate drives or other drives, they'll have 2 or 3 different ways to do it, but typically the assembly itself, the head assembly, is actually bound by